Anti-Western activists dominate legacy media and they're increasingly in control of our institutions. Masquerading as kind-hearted leftists, their dangerous doctrine has been accepted by large sections of the population, without the second look that would have revealed the true nature of this ideological current. We need to accept that this is a structural problem that has already gone incredibly far and will just get worse from here. We need to take back control if we want to salvage our way of life and leave a better world to future generations. That is why you need this video. I will do my best to explain the pathological worldview of an anti-Western leftist and discuss ways to counter their most common techniques. To start, let's explore the ideological foundations and the fundamental assumptions that shape their worldview. Number 1. Moral relativism. Everything to them is relative. Here is how they reach that conclusion. As science has been hugely successful in improving our material condition, they turn to it in the hopes it can alleviate the nagging sense of anxiety and meaninglessness that most of us experience. But science makes no value judgments. Turning to science for guidance on life inevitably leads to the conclusion that nothing matters because we will all die, our sun will explode, and one day the universe itself will become a static wasteland from which the last ray of light has disappeared eons ago. This conclusion is obvious from the start, as science excludes human experience as a valid variable, so by definition, life cannot be worth anything in this worldview. That's also why social systems predicated on rationalist ideologies like Marxism end up killing so many people. The anti-Western types wholeheartedly accept the conclusion that moral values don't exist and that life is meaningless and use it to their advantage. If values don't exist, there sure cannot be a distinction between good and bad. Thus, everything becomes relative and subjective. Truth can then be whatever they want it to be when it comes to psychological or societal questions. This whole argumentation never attempts to answer the question relating to the human experience. It is just an elaborate power grab masquerading as rational thought. The will to live has to come from within, it's not hidden somewhere for us to find. Nihilism is an understandable conclusion for a 14-year-old trying to address existential questions for the first time. They'll grab onto the materialistic wannabe scientific worldview as it's all they're ever taught. But what is acceptable in a lost 14-year-old soul is ugly in a 20-year-old and unforgivable in a 30-year-old. Grow up or shut up. Now, let's explore the goals that they pursue by pushing moral relativism. First of all, I would say that it helps them push the equity agenda. If everything is relative, everything is worth the same, as there are no objective distinguishing factors. To them, this is a goal we should strive for. Number 2 is they want to have a right to shape reality at their will. Reality is exactly what they say it is. After all, if reality is a blank slate with no structure, why not? Number 3, they want to stop dialogue and fruitful discussion and substitute it with power dynamics. After all, if reality has no structure, there is nothing to understand and discuss. We can already see the consequences of their tactic working, as dialogue and discussion are increasingly substituted with dogma handed down by experts and morally pure activists. Everybody who disagrees gets cancelled. Assumption number 2. Existence is corrupt. The anti-Western activist thinks existence itself is fundamentally evil and should be destroyed either entirely or as a step towards utopia. This comes from their sense of inadequacy when confronted with the wonders of Western civilization. Science, technology, the rule of law, the idea that individuals are worth anything at all, these are all victories of Western culture whose effect is measurable in the unprecedented material wealth we have in spite of the fact we have abolished slavery and serfdom, and in the incredible sophistication of our traditional institutions. The anti-Western activist, knowing they lack any skill or admirable quality whatsoever, feels belittled by the existence of something that is so manifestly good. Observing differences among any sort of categories, be it people, jobs, or places, causes their low-powered brains to experience a cognitive dissonance, as their radical relativism would imply differences don't exist. And yet, they can't override their humanity completely, and so they know in their gut that differences do exist. They perceive this as an insult to the natural order of how things should be. The explanation to them is that existence must have been corrupted by human activity. They can then put themselves in the role of a reformer or martyr prophet. Have you ever heard the following statements? Humanity is a virus. Maybe it would be better if we go extinct. Or, Having children is wrong, we are already too many. If yes, you know anti-Western ideals have infected the person you were speaking to some degree. Or hopefully, they were just parroting their favorite influencer. So why are they motivated to have this assumption? Number 1, they want to feel better about their inadequacy. Number 2, they want to reserve the right to tear it all down since it's all corrupt. And third, they want to fashion themselves as prophets who have first diagnosed the terrible ills of society and then selflessly tried to fix the problems. The cure, of course, is a nice cleansing fire. The most important consequence of this is that skill and merit become demonized, as they create differences between people and therefore run counter to their thesis that differences don't exist. Skill and merit thus get substituted with identity-based power dynamics to structure society. Assumption number 3. The world is a fight between oppressors and oppressed. This one is a bit of a combination between assumption 1 and assumption 2. If all is relative, we cannot objectively decide what is better and what is worse. Then, to be as nature intended, everything and everyone should be equal to everything and everyone else, as distinctions are not built into their worldview. If you combine this with the idea that human existence is existentially corrupt, it must mean that if we observe disparities between people, it must be a consequence of corrupt human nature, aka the oppressor oppressing the weak. They use the oppressor versus oppressed dynamic everywhere, so it is important you know how to spot it. In their world, groups of people can be oppressed in some situations and oppressors in others. Which role is highlighted obviously depends on what argument the anti-Western type is trying to win. This is the laughable doctrine of intersectionality. Now that we have seen the philosophical plumbing of their worldview, we can explore the toolkit they use to spread their perverse ideology. Tool number 1 in their toolkit is redefining words. The preferred tool of an anti-Western subversive is to redefine words as to 1. Slander their enemies, 2. Covertly change the topic to throw the enemy off balance. Examples of tactic number 1 are how they changed the meaning of anti-vaxxer and vaccine during the COVID pandemic. Anti-vaxxers used to be people who rejected all vaccines. Now it is used to slander those that specifically don't want to get the COVID-19 vaccine. A vaccine used to be something that protects from catching a disease. Now, it has been watered down to something that prevents a serious course of the illness. An example of tactic number 2 is how they changed the meaning of the word racist. A racist used to be somebody who judges others by physical traits rather than by the content of their character, as Martin Luther King correctly put it. Now, racist is whoever opposes racial equity agendas. Open racism towards what they claim to be oppressors is a perfectly acceptable tool to achieve this goal. The impact of this technique cannot be understated. It is by hijacking the meaning of words commonly accepted as denoting something good or admirable that they get the general, unaware public on their side. This is one of the most powerful tools they have at their disposal, and we need to take back control ASAP. I already started. Did you notice how I almost never used the words leftist or social justice warrior? Instead, I insist on calling them anti-Westerners, because that is what they are, and that is what they want to achieve: tear down Western culture. To moderates who are not paying attention to how far this has gone, hearing the word left and social in social justice warrior gives the impression that their positions could be morally acceptable. Anti-Western leaves any doubt only to those who want to see the West fall. Ever wondered why it's so hard to understand what the gender police means with the words gender and sex? Or why sometimes when they talk about climate change, they actually seem to be talking about social issues? No worries, that is on purpose and part and parcel of their tactic. If they change the meaning of words on the go to make it look like they're undermining your argument, it becomes impossible to win an argument with them, as you're essentially discussing different topics. Coupled with the fact that it's them steering the conversation with their aggressive and arrogant tone, it makes it look like you're always one step behind. You need to notice what meaning they are attributing to emotionally charged words in each moment, and call them out if they attempt to change it while the conversation goes on. Tool number 3 is what I would call narrative control. While the above tools are definitely employed to gain control of the narrative, I believe that the main technique is to use supposed self-evidence to pass off their assumptions and goals as facts. You have to learn to catch people throwing in their assumptions as a given and not let them get away with it. For example, I just read a disgustingly biased Financial Times article in which the author writes, and I'm not joking, The US is also handicapped by its constitution, which among other things has made the Supreme Court, arguably the country's mightiest political institution, given congressional gridlock, a past winner-takes-all prize. What a statement. It is a universe in a nutshell, one where progress is defined as destroying traditional values in spite of the prosperity they have produced. A world in which the more admirable something is, the better you are as a person if you destroy it. In the meantime, another reader in the comments section was defining progress as having non-religious people in government. When you're confronted with people like this, you have to ask yourself, are these people so dramatically ill-informed about history, philosophy, and psychology that they just don't know any better? Or do they know exactly what we're up to and are simply malevolent? I'll let the viewer answer that question on a case-by-case basis. If the above fails, they invoke the name of science like a shaman extending his hands to the sky, invoking the gods. Of course, they have no idea what we're talking about, since most of them have shied away from STEM subjects like a vampire from garlic. Instead, they went into one of the many fields which amount to activist training camps. Remember what the scientific method actually is. It consists in observe reality, formulate hypothesis, test hypothesis, and see if it has any predictive power. Anti-Westerners especially like to forget about the last step, and instead like to quote data without context, cite experts and fact-checkers. The last step before cancelling you is the good old virtue signaling. They underscore what good people they are, and they equate your position with lack of empathy. If you don't comply, you must be a bad person. Finally, the last step, censorship. They have failed at countering you any other way, so they and their other unemployed friends take to social media and get you fired from your job, have your socials banned, and threaten anybody who dares talk to you. Before you go, I would like to leave you with a few pointers. Number 1, be informed and well-spoken. If you don't do your due diligence, you'll mess up and give them surface of attack. Number 2, if you are informed and well-spoken and you have done your due diligence, stand firm on your opinions. Society is not yet sufficiently corrupt to make you lose if you stand firm, even in the face of a shitstorm. Number 3, start making as much noise as they do. Hoping for the problem to go away will not work, and in this modern age, you need to attract attention if you want people to listen. Number 4, use their techniques against them. Start redefining words, or coin new memorable terms and use them against them. If you like this content and you think other people would benefit from watching this video, please like and subscribe.